Hello, YouTube and Redemption. This is Mega Man Land Prime here with a deck profile for you for a deck that I would like to call Silent Night. Now, this deck just won RobM's Zoom Invitational, and I decided to make a deck profile for all you here to see just how powerful some of the cards from Gospel of Christ Phase 2 really are. Anyway, let's dig in. We'll start off with our hero lineup with Resurrection Revealer. Now he says that while you control at least 2 Gospel Angels, negate opponent's neutral cards. And if he attacks, you can either exchange him with an Empty Tomb human from deck or take a good Gospel Dominant from deck. Although for the purposes of this deck, we are pretty much just only going to be taking good Dominant from deck if we ever put him in battle. Then we have Cherubim. Cherubim gets to look at our opponent's hand and put all evil dominants on the top of their deck. Then it can ban to a Cherubim, Green Prophet, or a Teal Priest. Then we have Guardians from Glory, which has a star ability of discarding an evil card from a reserve, which is very useful if we don't draw it in the opening hand. Then, when it's in battle, it protects lost souls from evil cards. It can ban to a Gospel hero or can take a Gospel card from reserve. Good Gospel card. Then we have the Expatriator. This negates an opponent's evil card in play or set-aside area. If it's not a human, you can actually kick it under their deck. And then it can ban to a Gospel Angel and cannot be interrupted. And now, one of the ultra rares of this set, Gabriel Mouth of God. He gets to negate an evil card. You can take a silver Gospel card from a deck or discard pile, or you can ban to a Gospel hero, or you can reserve an evil card from opponent's deck, and it cannot be negated. Again, very powerful, and recommend getting actually all of the ultra rares from this set. All of them are pretty good. Next up we have the Messianic Messenger. He lets us take a good card from our deck or reserve if our opponent has hand advantage, or can ban to a Nativity hero and cannot be interrupted. Then, for the guys that we want to see at the bottom of our banding chains, we have Angel of Warning, which lets us look at our opponent's hand or search our deck for a site or good fortress. Legion of Angels, which protects our Gospel heroes from lone evil characters. You're allowed to draw X, which X is the number of Gospel Angels, max 3. And then if your opponent has 2 or more evil characters in battle, you can search your deck for a good Dominant. All very powerful. Then we have Angel of the Harvest, which he can create a Lost Soul token in our opponent's Land of Bondage. You can look at the top X cards of deck, max 7, X being the number of Gospel Angels, take up to 1 and underdeck the rest. And he also cannot be interrupted. And then the Ministering Spirit, another territory class boy. He has a Unity of Silver, which basically says that if our opponent uses a draw ability, we can underdeck an evil card in their territory or set-aside area, and while he's in battle, we are restricting evil enhancements from a brigade that is not already in battle, and he cannot be prevented. So, that is our hero lineup. Moving on to our good enhancements. Now, for our first set of good enhancements, we're going to be looking at our territory class enhancements, namely our searchers. Starting off with Angelic Guidance. This says we get to look at our opponent's hand and search our deck for a silver card. Now there's 2 things to note about this card. First off, it does not say good card, so that means you can actually search sites with this card. And second, because its references in Matthew, specifically Matthew 2, it's actually a nativity card. Because nativity cards are anything with a reference from Matthew 1 or 2 or Luke 1 or 2, excluding the genealogies. Anyway, next up we got An Angel Appears. Now this has a star ability of top-decking a New Testament artifact from reserve, but we're probably never using that. The ability we are going to be using, though, is you can play a Gospel Angel from reserve or deck if your opponent has a hand advantage, and your hero may ban to an angel if this is played during battle. Very useful for its purposes. Then we have Fifth Seal / Justice Seekers. Now, as a good enhancement, this can search our deck or reserve for a good New Testament enhancement. And as a character, it honestly does not matter for this deck because we will never be playing it as a character. Next up, we have the Annunciation. Now, this has a star ability of letting us look at a hand or a reserve, which actually is pretty useful going first to know what your opponent has. But the second ability is actually very useful too, because if it's used by a nativity hero, you can take a good dominant from deck or reserve. And if it's played in battle, you can negate all cards except good nativity cards played in battle. Very powerful for some combining of banding chains. And speaking of other cards that are very beneficial to nativity, we have Flight into Egypt. Now, as a star ability, this has the ability to protect good nativity cards from harm until the end of turn. Take note that this means that enhancements also cannot be discarded, not just your heroes. At least till the end of turn. Unless it's by game roll. Then, its ability is, if your opponent has hand advantage, negate and reserve an evil card. Very useful for in battle. Then we have Lost Coin Found. With this, we can interrupt the battle, we can convert an evil human, or reserve an evil non-human, and then take a New Testament artifact from reserve. Again, really useful for getting out of some annoying situations that a lot of cards will put you into. Next up, we have Gathering of Angels. Now, this has a star ability to resurrect an angel, but its main ability is interrupt the battle. Your Gospel hero may ban to any number of New Testament angels, then discard up to X evil enhancements, X being the number of angels in battle. This is actually kind of crazy because this is the equivalent of those negate and discard all evil enhancements currently played in battle, but it also has a banding ability attached to it as well, making this a very powerful card. Then we have War in Heaven, both a silver good enhancement and an orange evil enhancement, which can again discard an opposing card in battle that is not a human. And our last good enhancement, even though the last one was technically a dual-aligned one, is the weapon Sword of Light. Now, this card has the star ability to top deck an Angel Warrior from deck, and the ability to negate an evil card in play or set-aside area. You can discard this card to discard the card it's negating unless it's a character. Again, very powerful for a weapon. And that's all of our good enhancements that we're playing, as well as our one dual-aligned enhancement that we're playing. And now on to the evil characters. First off, we have the Possessing Spirit. This is actually, in my estimate, probably one of the most powerful common cards that was printed in this set. Now, this is territory class, which means you can just play it. And it's so powerful it does have a unity of gospel characters. So its ability is that it can band to a gospel evil character, or if it's played from the hand, You can place this on any good card to negate all good cards in the controller of the placed card's territory and set-aside area. In other words, this is another one of the main pieces of this deck, in which this helps you negate everything in your opponent's territory. And take note, this says good cards. That means that any territory class enhancements that they play are also negated. Then the next territory class character that we play, and the only other one that we play, is Restless Spirit. Now, this lets you protect your orange gospel cards in territories and New Testament fortresses in set-aside areas from good cards. And if it blocks, you can take a New Testament orange card from reserve. Now, generally speaking, you just want this guy to sit in your territory and protect your possessing spirit and everything else, but he's also useful when he comes to battle. Then we have the Strong Demon, which he can underdeck an evil card from reserve with a star ability. That may or may never just come up. But the thing that we care about is his main ability. He gets to look at the bottom 3 cards of our deck, and if there's an evil card, we can add it to our hand or add it to battle if there's a placed orange card in play, which is really good, really fast, especially because, again, he will just place when played. And then we have one of the other ultra rares from Gospel of Christ Phase 2, Beelzebub. Now, his star ability is you can discard the top card of your deck to discard a hero. It does say and, so they're actually doing it at the same time, but this can be useful if there's something really nasty you need to get rid of, like a Moses. Then you have his ability that you can banish a placed orange card on a hero to discard that hero. He can ban to a demon, or he can take a demon from deck or reserve. And he cannot be negated. Very powerful. I'm still looking at ways possibly to abuse that first ability, but it's a bit of a challenge. Then we have Evil Spawn. So he lets us just search our deck for a orange gospel enhancement, and then after battle you can put this on any hero to, at any time, you can underdeck him and that hero. Very important. Then we have the Sordid Spirit. Now, the Sordid Spirit's ability is actually really useful to get out basically everyone else, because he can place on a good card in a territory to add a gospel demon from deck or reserve to battle. So essentially he's going to go out of battle to replace himself. And then while he's placed, he's going to negate that good card, and if it's a hero, gets paralyzed. Which, take note, paralyzed means that they cannot enter battle. Very, very important and very useful. And he cannot be prevented. Then we have one of the more interesting cards in this deck, the Thief. Now, this lets us negate a good card in a territory, and if it's a character and enhancement, we can discard one of our characters to steal it. Then he will exchange for a thief or a generic demon in our deck or territory. Which brings us to the last boy that we got, Judas the Betrayer, or Judas Iscariot. Although we will never be using Judas Iscariot's side, we will just be using this. Which, while he's in battle, restricts good dominance and can ban to a demon or can steal an artifact out of a deck. Very, very scary. And again, being orange means that all of our enhancements are going to work on him. So that's our evil character lineup. being namely Gospel Demons. Now moving on to the evil enhancements. Now our first evil enhancement is the Wages of Sin, which this is actually an ultra rare from the Fall of Man, but it's still a very good one, again because territory class. Now this lets us search our deck or reserve for an evil card with a discard ability. Then we can either add that card to battle, discard a hero in battle, or underdeck this card. 9 times out of 10, because this is not being played during battle, it's getting put under deck. Then we have Driven by Spirits. Now this is also territory class, very important to note, which has the star ability to top deck a demon from deck, but again, its primary ability is its actual ability, that we can search our reserve for an orange card, or deck if there's a placed orange card. Well, if you control a placed orange card. Now this is actually a quick thing to note. All cards that are placed by your effect, you still own and you still control. So it technically falls under the proper your. Now, if this card is played in battle, you can underdeck this card and any one character you desire. Pretty useful for recycling. Now, next up is Two Possessed. Now, this creates a Violent Possessor token, which is a 2/2 male demon, Orange Brigade. But this also does have a unity of that all your evil characters must be gospel. Now this creates 2 evil character tokens. You can place each token on a human hero to restrict that hero from playing enhancements. That is actually kind of scary, because that means that if your opponent only has 2 human heroes and you use this, that basically means that they have to go to battle without being able to play enhancements. Again, scary. The next card we have is Destructive Sin. Now this has a really useful star ability, if we don't get it on the first turn, of letting us discard a good card from a reserve. Then on top of that, for its in-battle ability, it gets the Withdrawal Heroes, and then it will place in territory. And while in territory, if your opponent draws from a good ability, you can just draw one from the bottom of your deck instead. So in other words, your opponent tries to math you, you go, cool, Destructive Sin, I draw one from bottom instead, and you draw nothing. The next card we have is Choked Seed, which its star ability lets us top deck a good enhancement from reserve, although we probably won't be doing that much. But its main ability lets us draw X. We can draw X from the bottom of our deck, and then place on a hero to prevent enhancements used by that hero. Take note, X is the number of placed orange cards, which is important because this can possibly become 16 really quickly. But on top of that, we'll be going over this a little bit more in the combo section, but there's a few combos that you can do with this to cause more problems for your opponent. Then we have Sin and Blasphemy. Again, one of the more powerful cards from this set. Basically, if you've played Redemption for a while, you might know about the Interrupt Draw 3 Play Next cards. Well, we just got their spiritual successor in a card like this, which interrupts the battle. You can play a New Testament orange enhancement from reserve, and then each player may draw one from the bottom of deck. Now, this is actually even more consistent than some of those, because you might be relying on that draw 3 to get an enhancement, whereas this, I can just set up something in the reserve to always play off of this. And it's still an interrupt the battle. Again, crazy. Next up, we have Blasphemies, which is very simple. Negate and discard a good card. Then you can search your deck or reserve for a curse or red dragon, cannot be prevented by an angel. Now, a bit of a spoiler here, we actually have 2 curses to search through this card. Although there's one that you're probably always going to be getting. Then the last one, for the enhancements, is Deteriorating Condition. This lets us interrupt the battle. We can take a Gospel Demon from reserve, and you can band to any number of Gospel Demons. Cannot be negated while a place or card is in play. And take note, the X is the number of New Testament demons. Which, this can get out of hand really quickly. First off, because it cannot be negated. Do note that that does mean if the cross is up, this is being tossed. But that does also mean that I can go in with 1 and go, oh cool, Deteriorating Condition. I'll abandon everyone. A bit crazy. And that's all we have for the evil enhancements. Time to move on to artifacts. The first artifact we have is the Great White Throne. Now, this lets us banish an evil card from a discard pile to search our deck for a hero. And then at any time, we can discard an evil card in our territory to withdraw all but 1 evil character. Now, this actually has a good bit of few combos, and we'll again be going over those later. But take note, both of these abilities are very useful. Then we have the New Covenant, which, as an enhancement, we are never going to use, but as an artifact, it lets us take a good gospel enhancement from deck or reserve. Now, that is important because that's basically a search of any gospel enhancement that we want. And considering this deck is 99% gospel enhancements, having an option to just say we can search any good gospel enhancement we want is going to be really useful. And then the last artifact that we have is actually the curse that we were just mentioning, blindness. Now, as an enhancement, this negates all other enhancements. As an artifact, or as a curse, this basically says that if our opponent searches their deck, they have to search a random card instead. Which is, kind of scary. But, again, one of the interesting things is that because this is searchable, well, by blasphemies, you can actually use blasphemies to negate and discard a card, then search blindness, play blindness, and even though blasphemies will get negated, blindness will actually not go back to the deck and will still negate everything else because blindness has moved locations. And that's all we got for the artifacts. On to sites and fortresses. So the first and only site that we have is Golgotha. Now this can hold the cross, but more importantly, if it's put in play, we can take a gospel character that's not a hero from deck or reserve. And on top of that, the first evil enhancement played by a New Testament character, each battle cannot be prevented. Now this is actually very important because this can actually search, namely the possessing spirit, which we really want to get as soon as possible. So the first fortress that we have is Chamber of Angels. And if you know me, you'll know that this is actually my second favorite card in the game, and that I actually used to play the original back in the good old days. But I'm happy to say this one is better. So first off, this plays the set-aside area and can hold any number of angels. Now, if your angel is harmed or defeated, you can put it here instead. And while this is occupied, you're just negating all evil cards and territories. Now, an important thing to note about this is because there's no way for angels to exit, you can just take angels out and put them in whenever you want during the prep phase, which is very important. and actually plays to how I tend to play this deck. The next fortress we have is Bethlehem Stable. Now this is a good nativity card. It also holds the manger. And this protects your hand, deck, and reserve from opponents. Again, pretty useful for all of the going into deck or hand control that's in the game. And if your nativity hero is harmed or defeated, you can just put it in your reserve instead. And each upkeep, you can take a good nativity card from reserve. Again, there's some combos that you can do with this card that I will show off a little bit later. And the last fortress we have is the evil fortress, the Gates of Hell, which plays the set-aside area. And at any time, you can discard the bottom card of your deck, and if it's an orange demon, you can play it instead. During battle, you can discard this card to add a demon to battle, which is insanely powerful. And if you've either know what's under your deck or you've stacked the bottom of your deck with, say, underdecking Evil Spawn by its own ability, or you use the Strong Demon to look at the bottom 3 cards of your deck and you know that the bottom card of your deck is a demon, or something of that nature, you can actually use the Gates of Hell to just get that demon right away. That's all we got for fortresses. Now on to dominance. Get ready, because they're very dominating. So the first dominant we have is the Son of God. Now, again, to note, this is actually a nativity card because it's from Luke 2. Again, very important to note because we can search nativity cards. Then we have the Second Coming, which basically just lets us search for a good dominant, 9 times out of 10's on a god, and be able to play it again. And we're on to the third ultra rare from Gospel of Christ Phase 2, the Resurrection. Now you can play a good Gospel Fortress and Empty Tomb hero from deck or discard pile. If it's played during battle, your New Testament hero can ban up to 3 New Testament human heroes. Now this actually is very, very, very potent for the main strategy of this deck, which we will be getting into in the strategy part of this video. Next card that we have is Angel of the Lord. Now, if you're playing in a pre-rotation format, there is a nativity Angel of the Lord, but that one has not been reprinted. As such, there is no nativity one that can be played in rotation. Then we have 3 Woes, Crowd's Choice, which just lets us take good or evil card. You just basically have to declare which one you're taking. And then Mayhem, which is, again, pretty useful. And that's all we got for dominance. On to our Lost Souls. For our Lost Souls, we have Lawless, which, if this card gets drawn, we get to reveal the top 6 cards for deck, put all Lost Souls in play, and take an evil card and add it to the owner's hand. We have Distressed, which negates our opponent's banned abilities. We have a new card, Defiled. Now this is actually a very powerful card because it has a unity of New Testament souls, but if your opponent plays a good card from hand during battle, you get to draw X the number of brigades on that card, which can get out of hand really fast. Trust me. Then we got Imitate, which lets us copy a New Testament enhancement's ability for a turn. Undesirables, which basically lets us skip our opponent's battle phase if they rescue this. Humble, which actually is one of 2 Lost Souls that cannot be negated, because this says that while your opponent has hand advantage, your cards cannot be prevented by their cards. And then lastly, we got Crowds, which basically says if I've drawn less than 4 cards this turn, my hand and deck are protected from my opponent. And that's it for our Lost Souls. And now on to the reserve. And now for our reserve, we are starting off with the Heavenly Host, which is again a nativity card, also territory class, which he says that if a Heavenly Host token attacks, you can underdeck an evil card with strength X or greater, X being the number of cards in your hand. Now, you might be wondering, how do you make a Heavenly Host token? Which is the next line of the ability. So if a unique nativity hero is put into play, you can create a Heavenly Host token, which a Heavenly Host token is a 1/9 Silver Male Angel Warrior, which means he's Warrior class. Now, do note, he is actually a unique nativity hero, so he will create a token once he comes into play. Then we have the Magnifying Multitude, which is generic, but also nativity. It has a star ability that we're never going to use because it's in reserve, but for its hero ability, we can draw 2 cards, and then negate cards with toughness of X or greater, X being the number of cards in hand. Cannot be prevented. This is actually really good if we have like nothing in our hand or barely anything, and then we can just be negating pretty much every evil card. Otherwise, it's okay. Now we have one of the favorite cards that I love to grab from the reserve, The Child is Born. This is a nativity card. Again, star ability we're never going to use, but this interrupts the battle. We can take a nativity hero from reserve, and then we can bend to any number of New Testament heroes. This is really crazy and can get out of hand really fast. The only reason why this is in the reserve and Gathering of Angels is in the main deck is because Gathering of Angels may as well also be a negate and discard as well as a band. But take note, usually we want to use The Child is Born to get Magnifying Multitude out and then add that into the battle. Then we have Expelled from Heaven. Again, star ability we're never going to use. Negate and banish an evil card except for a human. If it's used by a New Testament hero, you can draw 2, cannot be prevented. Now, this actually would probably be in the main deck, except for the fact that War in Heaven is in the main deck already, and we don't want too many cards that cannot affect humans in the main deck. And that being dual icon means that it's got a bit more versatility than this card. Not a bad card, but just limited in its use, especially when we have another comparable card. Then we have the Manger. Again, star ability we're never going to use. This is a nativity card, but it lets us negate an evil or neutral card or play or set aside area. Then, if your nativity hero is blocked, you get to draw 1, which is just kind of nasty with the banding chain that we're going for. And then, for our evil characters, we have the Prince of this World, which, again, star ability we're never going to use, but this protects your gospel demons from lone heroes and opponents' dominance. You can bounce a character in a territory, cannot be prevented. The thing to note about this, it protects all your gospel demons from lone heroes and opponents' dominance, not just itself. So if I have a giant banding chain and I suddenly drop this in, yeah, you might need to get another hero in battle pretty quickly. Then we have the Deafening Spirit, which is an evil territory class enhancement and an evil character, being a generic demon. If it's put in play or played from a territory, you can negate a good card this turn, and if it's an enhancement, pitch it. Then, if this is an enhancement, you can convert it to an evil character. Now, do note that how this card works, I believe you can actually just play it as an evil character, and you can even just play it as an evil character to negate a good card in a territory. I usually save it for battle, but either one works, honestly. Then we have Pseudocyle Swine Stampede, another very powerful card, and actually one of the cards that I put in here to play off of Sin and Blasphemy if I'm losing the battle and I know I'm not going to be able to manage a win out of this. In which this discards all evil characters in battle, to shuffle all lost souls in territory. He has an evil enhancement. Take note that the X is the number of my demons. As a character, I can discard this card to add a demon from territory or reserve to battle. Take note that as a character, it's a generic animal. As the other curse that we mentioned, we have Cursed for us. As an evil enhancement, we can reserve a good dominant from a hand or a territory, and then discard a hero. This actually is kind of nasty because if you can use this, pitch their 3 woes, and then discard a hero, and then on top of that, if you use Sin and Blasphemy and play this as an interrupt, it's basically an interrupt the battle and discard a hero. Kind of nasty. But its other ability as a curse lets you place a orange gospel enhancement from discard pile onto a hero for 1 turn to restrict good dominance. Very nasty and very useful. Then the last card that we have in here is House Divided, which negates and discards all dual icon and multi-brigade cards. And if a placed orange card is in play, it's regardless of protection. Now, some people might be questioning dual icon and multi-brigade. So, just a quick clarification. First off, 3 woes is a dual icon card, and even when it's solidified onto an icon, it's basically been noted that these still count as dual icon cards. So basically, a lot of your opponent's characters can get hit by this. Their covenants will get hit, their curses will get hit, 3 woes will get hit, and other stuff, even like Deafening Spirit and whatnot, will also be sniped by it. It's also good to note that multi-brigade basically means anything that has more than 1 brigade on it. So like these are multi-brigade. It doesn't just mean rainbow. And that's all we got for the reserve. Now let's move on to strategies. Alright, starting off with strategies. The primary strategy of this, well, comes back to a few problems that a lot of people have been having with the game recently. Namely that there's so much territory going on, which comes back to the name of this deck. You see, we want to have a silent night. A silent territory where battle is the only time that our opponent is doing stuff. Which is why we have these. Because you see, with all 3 of these in play, we are negating every card our opponent plays. Chamber of Angels is negating our opponent's evil cards and territories while occupied. Possessing Spirit is negating good cards when it's placed on a good card. And Resurrection Revealer just needs another angel in play to be negating neutrals. Which, when these combine together, basically says your opponent's not playing in their territory. All those territory class enhancements that you got, cool, they're not going off. Oh, you have a character negating territory? Cool. It's already negated. Too bad. All of these are very, very powerful. And this combo basically is one of the biggest cores of this deck. So much so that this deck is somewhat built around it. First and foremost, the Resurrection actually grabs 2 of these cards in Chamber of Angels and Resurrection Revealer, as Resurrection Revealer is an empty tomb hero, and Chamber of Angels is a good fortress. And then we also have Golgotha to grab the Possessing Spirit whenever we need to. And we actually do run some other cards to either access these or just access what we need in these guys. Angel of Warning, first off, can get us into Chamber of Angels or Golgotha right off the bat. And as soon as Angel of Warning has no more searches, guess what? We can just place it in chamber. Oh, how useful. We have the Great White Throne to search both our Angel of Warning and our Resurrection Reeler for when we need to, or we don't want to use the Resurrection just yet because take note, this can grab from discard pile, which we really want to take advantage of. Then on top of that, we have the Annunciation. Now, take note, this can search a good dominant from deck or reserve, like the Resurrection. Now, we are not only trying to make our opponents have a silent night, but we are also trying to make sure that our angels are the only things having fun. So let's move on to the main banding chain of this deck. So we have Cherubim to top deck all their evil dominants, and it can band to a green prophet. So he'll band to Gabriel, who's a green silver for prophet, who's also nativity. He will negate an evil card, then band to Guardians from Glory to protect lost souls from evil cards, so my opponent can't just get rid of lost souls or try to Ananias, can't Death of Unrighteous, can't Suicidal Swine Stampede, etc. to get rid of or even protect their lost souls, who then will band to the Expatriator, which if my opponent has a Sheol or Gates of Hell or something that's not being negated by my Silent Night combo, well, that just disappeared. And then lastly, they will band to one of three options. My personal favorite is the Legion of Angels, though, because it now puts this entire combo being protected from lone evil characters. Plus, I get a draw. Plus, if they do find a way out, I get to search for a good dominant. Which actually brings back to another little thing with the Great White Throne. So, if I have the Great White Throne out, and I have this, they put two or more evil characters in battle, I'll just search Angel of the Lord. I will Great White Throne to drop them back down to 1 into the one that survives. A pretty useful combo, but there are a few others to go for as well. If I know my opponent has a Scattered, instead we'll put the Ministering Spirit on the back of this chain. So now it's actually very unlikely that they'll be able to play Scattered or any of the other cards that underdeck giant banding chains. Or if we just need to get more lost souls, we'll just put an Angel of the Harvest, get essentially a check the top 7, and also create a lost soul. If we need stuff, we still have Angel of Warning to grab us any sites or fortresses that might still be stuck in the deck and then we need to get out. Now on to a few of our evil combos. So, as I mentioned about Strong Demon being able to play one of the bottom 3 cards of our deck, this is actually why Choked Seed is in our deck right now. Say my opponent comes in with a Lone Hero. Well, I can go Strong Demon, and if I've been able to manipulate the bottom of my deck, I can have Choked Seed in the bottom 3. So then I just go, oh, play Choked Seed, I will draw a bunch of cards, and then I'll place this on the hero in battle to prevent all of his enhancements. Putting my opponent in a very precarious situation. Unless they have Humble, but this I try to Son of God Humble right away. But that's a very useful combo for causing some problems to my opponent. Then we have the Blasphemies and Blindness combo. So, as I mentioned before, Blasphemies can search your deck or reserve for a curse. And the thing is that, so if you search Blindness, if you play Blindness, Blindness cannot be kicked back with Blasphemies anymore because Cascade Negate is no longer in this game. So Blindness will stay and just negate everything. Yes, the card that was discarded by Blasphemies will return, but you have to take that with everything else. Lastly, with Sin and Blasphemy, we have combos with both Cursed for Us and Suicidal Swine Stampede. So again, saying that we got this, if I'm in a somewhat precarious situation, but I think I can pull it out, I can go Sin and Blasphemy, and then Cursed for Us to get rid of their hero in battle while interrupting the battle. So say if they have a protect ability, that protect ability is being interrupted now. Or if I know I'm going to lose the battle, just Suicidal Swine Stampede, just take everything and just get rid of it. As well as all of my souls. A few other basic combos. Wages of Sin can actually search the Gates of Hell, Deafening Spirit, and House Divided easily, because each of these have a discard ability. And while most people would just look at House Divided and assume, yeah, it has a discard ability, people have a tendency to forget that these actually discard a card, which counts as a discard ability for Wages of Sin. Because it doesn't have to discard your opponent's stuff, it can discard your own. And also, lastly, Deteriorating Condition. And the reason why Prince of this World is actually in my reserve. So you see, I can go Deteriorating Condition on an interrupt, take Prince of this World from my reserve and add it to battle onto a massive banding chain that my opponent now has to try to get around while I'm protected from them. Becomes very problematic very quickly. Also, with the limit 4 activation rule, which means that Chamber of Angels can only absorb 4 angels at a time, you can actually take advantage of a few things with Bethlehem Stable. If your opponent takes out a gospel hero, say Gabriel or something, with Bethlehem Stable out, you can just put it into your reserve, and then your upkeep, just take it. Another important point for Bethlehem Stable, as well as also just being able to hold the manger. Trust me, you'd be surprised how useful that becomes so quickly. And with that, that is just about all the combos that I am interested in pointing out with this deck. Now, on to a few cards that I would like to either find a way to incorporate into the deck, or some ideas that some other people might be able to attempt to incorporate as well for modifying strategy towards their own likes or dislikes. Alright, lastly, for cards that you could add into this deck for yourself, or swap things around for your own strategies. We'll start off with the Comforting Cherubs. Now, this is an empty tomb hero with the star ability to top deck a gospel hero from deck, but its primary ability being you can play a lost soul from a deck, and you can ban to an empty tomb female or draw X, max 3. X being the number of redeemed souls of all players. Now, this has uses for, say, if you're going for more options to get with the Resurrection. This gives you another target, for sure. And it has some benefits there. As well as also if you're facing off against Empty Tomb, you can basically steal some of their females for your own offense, which also can help. I actually ended up dropping this because I was needing access to more stuff, especially when Angel of the Harvest just does it better. Another card is Striking Herod. Now, this is not a gospel enhancement, but being mono silver and interrupting the battle to discard an evil male human can find its uses as well. Although sometimes those uses might be a bit more mixed. Then we have Temptation in the Wilderness. Now, this is a dual brigade enhancement. As a good card, you can place it in territory. While a character is blocking, you can banish this to add your Gospel Angel to battle. And if you play it on evil, you can play it on a unique demon, and if you block with it, you can choose the hero who's attacking. Which actually is pretty useful. The issue why I've never actually gotten this into the deck mostly becomes that there's a few issues that I run into with this card. Namely that it's a lack of space. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a very good card. This can actually basically save a rescue attempt if somehow, like, your opponent hits scattered on you or something of that nature. But at the same time, it has some limited uses, especially with so much mass banning in this deck. Although I will suggest, if you do play this, it might be more advantageous to run Magnifying Multitude in the main deck, with the idea being you go Magnifying Multitude for a rescue attempt, you don't draw, you try to negate as much as you can, and if something comes up that you can't negate, then you go Temptation in the Wilderness to add something to battle, so then you can get a free draw, or access to some stuff that you might need. Another card you can play is Covenant with David. Now, as this is green, Gabriel can actually play this, and he can play Cider Good Fortress from deck, or Reserve played by David. It's not going to be played by David, but whatever. But as an artifact, it can also let you search for a king if you don't control one, which, noting Beelzebub is a king, gives you some options. Now, I ended up just not playing this or Reverence and Awe, actually specifically taking them out because I'd rather be running Angel of Warning, which can get me stuff back if it gets shuffled, for example. So another card you can play is the Coming Prince, which, as its star ability, it lets you look at the top card of your deck and you can underdeck it, which actually can be really useful with Choke Seed combos. And it lets you negate an evil card in battle and top deck a good star card from discard pile. Now, this is a card that really is good. It's just that right now, I have a limited number of star cards that I'm playing right now I don't really want to see again. I don't care enough to see again. As such, I'm not currently playing this card, but I'm actually looking at trying to find a version of this deck that can play around with the Coming Prince. Then we also have the Ends of the Earth, which, when this enters battle, you can reveal the top 7 cards of your deck, or a deck. You put a Lost Soul in play, and then you put a good enhancement in the owner's hand. And then the rest of the effect doesn't matter because we don't play missionaries. This is actually really useful for anything that restricts the type of enhancements that you're playing, because this lets you actually have every good brigade in battle, technically speaking. Although, as of right now, mostly because I'm just tight on space, I am not running this card. Although, again, this is a card I would recommend getting in if you can find a way to get it in. Now, for some evil characters, we have the Afflicting Spirit, which this is a generic Canaanite demon, which actually, interestingly enough, has some interesting play with the King of Tyrus, as King of Tyrus can actually get this from reserve. So this, though, says that you can exchange a hero in battle with an opponent's hero, and then after battle you can place this card on a good card to negate that card and paralyze it if it's a hero. Honestly, it's still pretty good. The main issue that I come across is that, honestly, as far as I've felt, the exchange has never been that great. namely just because of how people tend to play against this deck. But honestly, this is definitely still a very good card if you're playing a deck that you can manipulate some stuff more. Now, the next card is a card I actually really do want to get into this deck for a good few reasons. That would be Snaring Spirit. Now, this makes Evil New Testament enhancements used by it regardless of protection, which, again, note, that ability cannot be negated because that's granting a modifier. Then I can search my discard pile for an orange card with a place ability. Now, this is important for a few reasons. First and foremost, if Possessing Spirit ever gets discarded somehow, the Snaring Spirit can grab it right back, which is important. It can also take advantage of a few other things, such as being able to recycle Choked Seed or Evil Spawn or some other stuff. The big challenge right now is just figuring out what to take out for this card. This card will probably end up in the deck and as one of the core bases of the deck just because it's so good. The next is the Accumulator. Now, this is a mixed bag card for me. It's useful, but it's also not. So as territory class, once per game, it can create 7 evil character tokens. And if your Gospel Demon blocks, you can place up to 7 of those Wicked Spirit tokens on a character to decrease it XX. X being the number of Wicked Spirit tokens on those characters. Noting Wicked Spirit tokens are 1/3 male orange demons. Now, this has some uses. I was trying to find some way that you can manipulate things so that you can basically do this, place on a hero, and then have Beelzebub go to battle, and then Beelzebub will discard the hero that's in battle. But even then, that doesn't work that great, unfortunately. There's still some brainstorming. I feel like this is a very powerful card in the right circumstance. The big thing is just figuring out how that circumstance is. Next up, we have the Destroying Spirit. Now, this is a card I actually was playing for a while, and it ended up just falling out of the deck because I needed more room from other stuff. Now, this is a generic demon. It lets you draw X limit 3 from the bottom of deck, or you can equip an orange weapon from reserve. And it can ban to a generic demon. Now, there's actually some combos that you can do with this, where, again, if you've stacked the bottom of your deck appropriately, you can basically combo this with the strong demon to basically get a bunch of advantage, but it's been a mixed bag for me. And then lastly, we got Wandering Spirit. Now, this is a legacy rare, and it's actually a very interesting one, and it has a lot of uses. The only issue is that right now I'm having a hard time finding a way to take advantage of this card. So its ability is if a demon is discarded, you can put it under your deck. You can reveal the bottom of your deck. If it's a demon, play it, and it can ban to a generic demon, which cannot be negated. Which is nice and can build some banding chains, but at the same time, you also have to kind of question how useful is it in a lot of situations. Unless you're getting play abilities or you're finding some way to really obstruct your opponent, this can end up being more of a hindrance of just adding numbers onto your side when you really don't want that. Now, I'm actually going to discuss right away the card that I was actually looking to play with the Destroying Spirit the most, which is Words of the Accuser. Now, this is basically just a discard weapon to decrease a hero XX. X being the number of demons. Here's the thing, though. Depending on your build, especially if you're using the Accumulator, this X can become 20 plus. which could be an instant death to almost any character, which is really good. But at the same time, I kept running into issues of not having spots where I could take advantage of that, which started turning into more of an unfortunate situation. Again, if I had a way to possibly get choked seed onto a hero and then use Words of the Accuser to discard them, that would actually work great, but I need to find a combo that can do that effectively and consistently. Now there's also Evil Armor, which is the weapon that actually came in this set of GoC Phase 2. And I've actually been starting to kind of sour on this as a weapon for the purpose of its ability. You see, its ability is to protect the holder, a demon, from heroes with strength higher than the demon's toughness. Now, that might sound great to you initially, until you start realizing that most demons that are warrior class, such as Destroying Spirit, or Red Dragon, or King of Tyrus, or even the Strong Demon, have super high toughness. In other words, they're not being protected from anything, or being protected from very few things, which turns this from a really useful card to a kind of bad card really quickly. Although it does have a useful secondary ability of being able to look at the top X, limit 6, cards of deck, and you can take up to 1 and underdeck the rest. X being the number of Gospel Demons. Again, this can help you cycle through your deck. If you're playing for combos with trying to get Cursed Seed, you can actually take advantage of that. Now, for some other enhancements that I've been looking at as well. Hate the Light. Now, this is a really good card, because if it's played in battle, underdeck all heroes, which, do take note, this does underdeck your own, so be ready to have Chamber ready and Bethlehem Staple ready to catch all of your heroes so that you don't lose everything. But the second thing is the most important part. You can place this in a territory to protect heroes in that territory from artifacts and other heroes. Now, take note. This means that if you place this in your opponent's territory, they can't use banding abilities to heroes in their territory. They can't play something on a hero in battle, or even a hero in territory, that would affect a different hero. And their artifacts basically become useless as well. Now, I know the combo is dead, but for example, with Widow combo, they can't Life in the Sun anything except for the card that was played on, and they can't use their artifact to bounce a bunch of stuff to replay it as Meek, which is very important. So this is actually a really strong card, it's just that you gotta know how to play it. The next one is Dragon's Wrath. Now, this is actually a card that I would play in reserve for the point of, again, playing it off of Sin and Blasphemy, because this can discard all heroes, and any player can reveal Blood of the Lamb or Wear Their Testimony instead, and it ignores angels, and cannot be negated if it's used by Red Dragon. So here's the thing, that discard all human heroes is really useful, and you're still expecting that your opponent has 2 specific cards, which, while do see play even right now, considering that Justin Martyr is not seeing as much play, there's actually a stronger possibility that Dragon's Wrath will actually pull off. And again, a nice little thing to hit with Sin and Blasphemy to interrupt the battle, play Dragon's Wrath from reserve to just take out all their heroes. Another interesting card to try out in this deck is Nicolation's Teachings. Now, this one basically lets you choose a brigade and a hero in a territory. You place on that hero to steal their hero, and that hero can use enhancements of the declared brigade, and that can't be interrupted. Now, taking note that this is a place ability means that it synergizes with the Gospel Demons pretty well, and has some uses in stealing some of their more useful stuff. Although at the point that I'm at right now, again, with how this deck works, this becomes less useful, unfortunately. And the last of the cards that I have here is Mist, which each opponent must discard a card from their hand. If it's used in battle, it's selected at random. Then you get to underdeck an evil character or an evil enhancement from each discard pile. Now, this is actually really useful because, again, if you have gates, you can get that character back out. If you use this to put Choked Seed underneath your deck, you can strong team into play that, as well as sniping a card out of their hand. It has its uses. The issue right now, again, is space. If I had more space, this would actually be going right in. Well, after Snaring Spirit. But lastly, I have to discuss two other cards that I actually don't have right now. The first one being Reverence and Awe, and the second one being the Cross. Reverence and Awe I actually did have in this deck at one point, but I do not anymore, and I need to figure out what happened to the card. With Reverence and Awe, I think it is useful, although I will also admit that, to be perfectly honest, I just find Angel of Warning more useful. Now, that's not to say that both are not good cards, and also being able to play outside of battle is actually useful, but I'd rather have a card that lets me do that more than once, even if it doesn't come with the secondary benefit of letting me nuke my opponent's discard pile. The second one being the Cross, which I actually would be putting into this deck, except for the fact that I don't have one. Now, the Cross actually does a lot for this deck because, first off, you can play it on Golgotha. Second, you're allowed to turn off their dominance, which, noting that with this deck, dominance are probably the biggest concern, that is something that is actually very important to pay attention to. But lastly, because this deck just does not want to deal with things such as Scattered, that also gives us a better, stronger answer to Scattered, which we have to find other ways around otherwise. Not that we do not, but that it's just easier with an artifact that basically just throws it out. That is my deck profile for the Silent Night deck, explaining the deck, the strategies, and everything that you need to know. Now again, this deck has not been optimized. I will be working on optimizing it more as tournament season comes around, but until then, I hope you all have a blessed rest of your day, and have a very silent night.